There is a version of WrestleMania that lives in a specific kind of memory. The drive to the stadium, the shirts people are wearing in the parking lot, the noise in the concourse before you even find your seat, the moment the lights go down for the first entrance and the whole building goes from anticipation to something louder than that, and you are inside it, not watching it, inside it. And for a few hours, nothing outside that building exists. A lot of people watching this have that memory. Maybe it was your first one. Maybe your dad took you. Maybe you scraped together the money as a teenager and still remember which section you were in. That memory is attached to something real, to a building full of people who all showed up for the same reason, who all know the same names, who all feel the same things when the glass shatters or the gong hits. Now picture this. It's October. WrestleMania is 6 months away. You open the ticket sale the moment it goes live because you know from experience that if you wait, it gets worse. You join the queue. You wait. You finally reach the checkout page. The seat you're looking at, upper deck corner section, nothing special, is $276 before fees. You sit there for a moment. You know the resale market is worse. You know there is no cheaper option. You do the math on what the full weekend would cost, and the number that comes back is not a stretch. It is simply not possible. You close the tab. That moment, the quiet decision not to even try, is happening constantly right now. Not to casual viewers who bounce in and out, to people who have that memory, people who built a decade of plans around being in the building, people who used to find a way every time and are now finding that there is no way. And the thing is, they are not complaining about a bad product. They are not done with wrestling. The show is good right now. The television is compelling. They are watching every week. They just cannot be in the room anymore. That specific thing, being in the room, has moved into a different category of expense entirely. At the exact same time those tabs are closing, WWE is announcing the most successful event in company history. In 2024, WWE posted the most profitable year in its history. Then in 2025, it did it again. The Netflix deal, the Saudi Arabia shows, the sponsorship money, the media rights, the revenue streams TKO had built were producing at a scale the company had never seen. Not during the Attitude Era, not during Hulkamania, not at any point in 50 years of professional wrestling. By every financial measure, WWE has never been healthier. And in February 2026, they announced the number that sits at the center of all of it. WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas generated $66 million in ticket revenue across 2 nights, the most money any professional wrestling event had ever produced. The announcement used phrases like most successful event in WWE history and record-breaking gate and historic. Every word pointed in the same direction. This is what a thriving company looks like. There is a number WWE did not include. WrestleMania 41 sold approximately 118,000 tickets. WrestleMania 40 in Philadelphia the year before sold approximately 113,000. Roughly the same number of people walked through the gates both years. The attendance barely moved. The gate nearly doubled. The record was not built by drawing more people. It was built by charging the same people more money. That distinction does not appear in the press release. It is the only thing that explains the gap between the record profits and those closed tabs. To understand how that gap got built, you need to understand what happened in September 2023. That is when the merger between WWE and UFC was finalized. When Endeavor, the company that already owned the UFC, absorbed WWE and created a new publicly traded entity called TKO Group Holdings. 2 of the biggest properties in combat sports and professional wrestling now operating under one roof, answerable to one set of shareholders, guided by one strategic vision. The people who took over were Ariel Emanuel as CEO and Mark Shapiro as president and COO. Neither of them came from wrestling. Emanuel built his career in Hollywood talent representation. Shapiro came from sports broadcasting and media rights deals. What they knew, what they were brought in specifically to apply, was how to maximize the financial output of a live event property. And almost immediately, Shapiro said something that told you everything about what was coming. At the Goldman Sachs Communicopia and Technology Conference, speaking directly to institutional investors, Shapiro explained the problem with how WWE had operated under Vince McMahon. The old model, he said, had a fundamental flaw. WWE had been pricing tickets to accommodate families. And by doing that, Shapiro said, WWE had left money on the table. He said this out loud, to investors, as a selling point. Think about what that sentence actually means. For decades, the fact that a working-class family could afford to go to a WWE show was not considered a flaw. It was considered part of what WWE was. The traveling circus that came to your city and charged prices that let a dad buy 3 tickets without deciding what else he couldn't pay for that month. That was by design. Vince McMahon was aggressive and ruthless about many things, but former WWE writer Vince Russo has said directly that McMahon genuinely cared about fans being able to get through the door. Former WWE star Matt Hardy put it simply,
I feel like Vince was out there to try and bring families in. That was his whole thing. He was adamant about doing that and attracting families, but also he did try and make it as affordable as he possibly could have.
TKO looked at that approach and called it a missed opportunity. Everything that has happened since flows from that single position. The first thing TKO did was reduce the number of shows. Under McMahon, WWE ran approximately 300 live events per year. House shows in secondary markets, smaller arenas, the kind of card you could take your kids to on a Tuesday night in a mid-sized city for $50. These shows were not glamorous, they weren't televised, but they existed everywhere, constantly keeping WWE present in the lives of fans who couldn't afford the big events. TKO cut the schedule from 300 down toward 200. WWE President Nick Khan explained the logic on an earnings call. Reducing the number of events, he said, creates more scarcity in the United States, which is a good thing in terms of our overall gauge. Gauge. That word is doing a lot of work. Gauge means revenue extracted per event, not fans reached, not communities served, revenue per event. When you visit a city less often, the tickets to the show you do bring feel rarer. Rarity justifies higher prices. The house show that used to be a Tuesday night out becomes a once-a-year occasion. Occasions get priced differently than habits. Then came the second lever, dynamic pricing. When a WWE event goes on sale and the queue fills up, and it always fills up because the demand is real, the algorithm reads that surge and moves the price in real time. The seat you saw when you joined the queue cost more by the time you reach checkout. TKO frames this as capturing revenue that would otherwise go to scalpers. What it actually does is charge the most to the fans who care the most, the ones first into the queue who have been waiting for this sale for weeks. The algorithm rewards urgency with a higher price. By 2025, the average ticket for a standard Raw or SmackDown was roughly double what it was before the merger. Other sports and concerts saw prices rise too, which is expected. But nothing close to this pace. WWE's average did not drift upward with the market, it was pushed. WrestleMania has always cost more than a regular show. That is part of what WrestleMania is. The biggest stage, the loudest crowds, the culmination of a full year of storytelling. Nobody expected house show prices for a stadium event. What changed is the speed. For the first 20 years of WrestleMania, the price of a front row ticket rose gradually. It was moving, but it felt connected to what the event was becoming. Bigger venues, bigger production, a bigger place in culture. Then something shifted. By the early 2000s, prime seats were reaching prices most people had never seen attached to a wrestling ticket. And at WrestleMania 41, TKO's premium hospitality division sold first-row tickets at a fixed price of $50,000. Not a secondary market spike. Not a package with flights and hotels. A ticket. To sit in the first row, get access to a hospitality area, and have your photo taken on the entrance stage. $50,000. $50,000 is not a wrestling ticket. It is the UFC blueprint pasted over WrestleMania. TKO looked at the premium high roller demographic that sits ringside at UFC pay-per-views, the corporate buyers, the celebrities, the people for whom a 5-figure seat is a rounding error in a quarterly entertainment budget, and decided that was the model for the biggest night in professional wrestling. And the extraction does not stop at the door. Once you are inside, a standard t-shirt runs $50.
Check out what merch they had, and it didn't take me very long to realize that it was quite expensive, with each shirt being $50. So if you plan on buying yourself a shirt, or maybe buying a shirt for a family member, your child, whatever it might be, you're in for a bit of an expensive night.
A replica championship belt that used to be a kid's Christmas present now costs over $500. Under TKO's partnership with Fanatics, the merchandise itself has changed.
Quality of the shirts you can buy getting worse.
Fans report washed out colors, thinner fabric, a product that costs more and delivers less. The ticket is just the cover charge to enter the ecosystem. A family of 4 attending WrestleMania weekend, standard seats, a hotel, food, nothing premium, is looking at a bill that crosses 5 figures before they buy a single piece of merchandise. And if you want to actually meet a wrestler, the thing fans have been doing at WrestleMania week for decades, that has been monetized too. Under TKO, WrestleMania Access was replaced by WWE World, a ticketed event with tiered access and premium pricing. The meet and greet structure that emerged from it is assembly line by design. A fan pays hundreds of dollars, waits in line, gets 10 seconds, and is moved along before anything resembling a genuine moment can form. The interaction that used to feel like contact between a fan and the thing they loved has been timed, priced, and processed. The merchandise quality dropped. The access price went up. TKO cut the manufacturing cost and raised the retail price simultaneously. That is not a coincidence. It is the same logic applied to a different part of the product. Every layer of the experience has been examined for what it can yield. And when you step back and look at all of it together, the scarcity, the dynamic pricing, the tiered hospitality, the assembly line meet and greets, the Fanatics merchandise, a question emerges that the financial press never really asked. WWE is making more money from television rights than it ever has. From Saudi Arabia. From sponsorships. The live gate is no longer the main engine of the business. So why is TKO pushing so hard to extract more from the fans in the seats? The answer is, well, the answer is in what Shapiro told those investors. This is not about needing the money. It is about the philosophy. The price is going up because someone decided it should. There is a part of the WrestleMania 41 story that never made the press release. Las Vegas paid WWE millions of dollars in hosting fees and tax credits to bring the event to the city. The standard logic is that a major event stimulates local spending, hotels fill up, restaurants get busy, tourism money flows in. That argument is not entirely wrong, but the money flowing in came from people arriving on flights from other cities. People who could afford a $635 average ticket were not Las Vegas residents. They were visitors. The local working-class fan whose tax dollars helped bring the event to town was almost certainly not inside that stadium. The price made sure of that. The event was subsidized by one group of people and sold to another. The financial extraction was thorough, but money was not the only thing being extracted. Going into WrestleMania 40, WWE had spent 2 years building toward Cody Rhodes completing his story, finishing what his father never could by winning the WWE Championship. It was the most organically grown storyline the company had produced in years. The crowd was invested. The narrative arc was intact. Triple H had designed it carefully. TKO executives intervened. During a critical period of media rights negotiations, The Rock was inserted into the main event against Roman Reigns, a corporate decision made to maximize the event's media valuation rather than serve the story that had been building. The fan backlash was immediate and severe. Crowds turned. The company reversed course within weeks, putting Cody back into the main event position the story had always been pointing toward. It worked in the end, but the reason the reversal happened was not creative instinct. It was an audience that refused to accept a product being reshaped by deal-making. The following year, the same pattern. WrestleMania 41 was built around John Cena's retirement. The emotional architecture was already there. A 16-time champion ending his career, the kind of moment wrestling only gets to make once. TKO added The Rock and Travis Scott to the storyline to generate broader media coverage and drive ticket sales. The Rock did not appear. Travis Scott interrupted the main event. But the match that was supposed to be John Cena's historic championship moment in front of a crowd that had followed him for 2 decades became by wide consensus one of the worst received WrestleMania main events in the show's history. The story had been subordinated to the sales strategy. When the sales strategy did not deliver, the story paid the price. The match that resulted, the main event of the biggest show of the year, played to a crowd that had been selected by price. People who paid a premium to be in that building, but who had not spent 2 years inside the story that was supposed to end there. The room was full. The room was quiet. Something happened at WrestleMania 41 that TKO has not addressed publicly. The crowd was quiet. Not during one slow match, throughout the event. The energy inside Allegiant Stadium was noticeably subdued. The surges of spontaneous noise that define a wrestling crowd at its best. The chants that build without instruction. The moments when 60,000 people all react simultaneously were muted. WWE compensated during the broadcast by cranking the arena audio loud enough that fans reported they couldn't hear themselves cheer. If you watched at home, you wouldn't have known. The television product was protected. But the people in the building knew. This matters because professional wrestling is calibrated to audience response. The performer in the ring reads the room in real time, adjusting timing, holding a moment, accelerating based on what the crowd gives back. The electricity in a great WrestleMania match comes from the combination of the performance and an audience that understands exactly what they are watching. The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25, the crowd responding before anything has happened, the building already primed. That atmosphere is produced by 2 wrestlers and 60,000 people who have been following their story for years. The loudest wrestling crowds are built from people who have been following the story. At $635 average, the selection mechanism for who occupies those seats changes. The person who booked WrestleMania as part of a Las Vegas weekend is not the person who has watched every Raw since October. They are at a large live event. They are not inside a wrestling story. When something happens in the ring that would make a lifelong fan erupt, they look around first to gauge whether erupting is appropriate. The product TKO is selling to Netflix is an event that crackles. That energy comes from the people in the seats. By pricing those people out, TKO is degrading the thing it is monetizing. Here's the other side of this. TKO's strategy is working. Right now, today, by every metric a publicly traded company gets measured by, revenue is up, margins are expanding, the stock is performing. The $66 million gate is not a manipulation. It is evidence that a segment of the audience exists that will pay whatever is asked. And there is a version of this where that is simply the new reality. Maybe WWE wants fewer but wealthier attendees. Maybe live crowd energy matters less in a world where the primary audience watches on Netflix. Maybe the era of accessible stadium wrestling was always a temporary condition, a product of a specific economic moment, and what TKO is building is just what the product was always going to become. Maybe the working class wrestling crowd was never a permanent fixture. Maybe it was just a pricing decision that someone finally reversed. That argument has some logic to it. If the broadcast product can be protected with audio mixing, if the Netflix deal prints money regardless of whether the crowd is loud or quiet, then maybe the composition of the live audience genuinely does not matter as much as it used to. History suggests otherwise. Think about the Attitude Era, the Stone Cold period, wrestling genuinely everywhere, the ratings historic, the stars crossing into mainstream culture. WWE was selling out arenas every week. And then the cultural moment passed. The stories ran their course, and within 2 years, arenas that had been packed were running at half capacity. Nobody inside it saw it moving that fast. WWE came back. It always has. But it came back because there was a floor. Fans who stayed connected, even when they weren't attending, who kept the habit alive because the cost of the habit had never broken it entirely. When the product improved, those fans were ready. The door had stayed open. What TKO is building does not leave that door open. It prices as if the audience willing to spend serious money on a WrestleMania trip is the permanent foundation. It treats everyone below that level as someone who can be shed without consequence. That assumption has never been tested through a full cycle. The Attitude Era bust happened when prices were still accessible. Nobody has run this model through a creative downturn and found out what comes back. WrestleMania 42 is starting to show what the early stages of that test look like. Same city, same stadium, 1 year after the record. WWE has always rotated WrestleMania between cities because the novelty of the destination is part of what makes the trip feel worth taking. New Orleans gets it once, and the whole city treats it as an occasion. Going back to the same place in consecutive years is a departure from that principle, and the decision almost certainly comes from the same logic that drives everything else. Las Vegas performed. Go back. The model does not perform the same way twice. When you return to the same city 12 months later and ask the same audience to absorb the same prices, you start seeing the shape of the thing. The loyal fan who used to drive advance sales, who bought in October for an April show because the habit ran that deep, has done the math and stepped back. Promotional discounts do not move them. The card does not move them. Roman Reigns is on the show. Cody Rhodes is on the show. CM Punk is on the show. These are the three biggest names in WWE right now. In any previous era, that lineup sells a stadium in days. The cracks are not in the product. They are in the price. The casual high-spending tourist who replaced the loyal fan does not commit 7 months in advance. They decide when the trip feels convenient, when the moment is right. They appear late in the cycle. They do not carry the early numbers that signal to the market that an event is worth attending. When they are the primary audience, the sales curve looks different, and the gap between what TKO expects and what the market delivers becomes visible. You can look at the stock price, the expanding margins, the quarterly dividends, the billion-dollar media deals, and you have to admit something. The strategy is working. As a business maneuver, TKO is winning. The demand is real. The brand is growing. The $66 million gate is evidence that a segment of the audience exists that will pay whatever is asked. The question is not whether this model works on a balance sheet. It clearly does. The question is what it does to the culture of the product over time. What happens to a live event built on crowd energy when the crowd stops being made of people who know every word to the entrance theme? What happens to the loyalty that has carried this industry through every creative drought when the price of maintaining that loyalty becomes out of reach? What happens in the next downturn, and there is always a next downturn, when the casual high-spending audience moves on to the next event on their calendar, and the passionate base that used to stay through the bad years has already been priced away from the habit? Professional wrestling has survived everything. Steroid scandals, competing promotions, years of bad television. It survived because the fans who genuinely loved it kept showing up, kept watching, kept passing it down. That transmission, parent to kid, older fan to younger one, person to person in the upper deck of an arena, does not happen at $10,000 a weekend. And now, it may not happen in this country at all. TKO has announced that WrestleMania 43 will be held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. For 40 years, WrestleMania was a domestic event. It moved between American cities, and that movement was part of how it worked. The local economy of independent wrestling that built up around WrestleMania week, the small promotions running shows, the wrestlers making their own money in the surrounding ecosystem, the fans who could drive 3 hours and make a weekend of it. All of that depended on the event being somewhere reachable. Riyadh is not reachable. Not for the working class fan in Ohio or Texas or California who built the tradition of WrestleMania attendance into their life. International airfare, visa requirements, hotels in one of the most expensive cities in the Middle East. The barriers are not financial inconvenience. They are structural exclusion. The independent wrestling ecosystem that surrounds WrestleMania week, the shows that smaller promotions run to capitalize on the influx of traveling fans, the revenue that sustains wrestlers outside the WWE system, disappears entirely when the event moves to Riyadh. There is no traveling fan base to capitalize on. There is sovereign wealth, and there is a contract, and there is a press release about a historic partnership. The domestic fan who subsidized this company's growth for 40 years, who bought the tickets, the merchandise, the pay-per-views, who kept watching through every bad creative period because the door was still open. That fan is watching the event that belongs to them get relocated to a country they cannot afford to visit. TKO will announce what the gate was. They will use words like historic and groundbreaking and record-setting. They will not say anything about who used to be there. WrestleMania started in a sold-out Madison Square Garden with a $20 ticket and a dad who brought his kid because he could afford to. That kid grew up, brought their own kid, and somewhere in that chain, in that 40-year transmission of something genuinely loved, is where the real record was always being set. No press release is coming for that one. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe to WrestleFun for more. But as much as the ticket prices have changed, it's what TKO is doing behind the scenes that should really have fans paying attention. Click the video on your screen to see the rest of the story. See you there.